This video is sponsored by Foldforge. What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and it's time for another episode of the best armies in Warhammer 40k, the weekly video series where we go through undefeated Warhammer 40k armies from the past week of competitive play. And while the eyes of the world were on Atlanta, Georgia for the 2025 World Championships of Warhammer this weekend, we did have a lot of other events to talk about, and that's what we're going to be going through today. So let's go ahead and hop into a metagame breakdown. Now, we see more of a striation of the metagame, which, while it is relatively well-rounded with several factions being represented, we do see some of the top factions in the game being overrepresented at this point. This includes Aeldari, which took down the Midgard November GT, Broadsword Wargaming Major number 7, Sandstorm GT, Brewhammer GT number 8, and Segmentum Reval 2. That's 5 total wins and the absolute leader for the week. And given the fact that we did see them at the World Championships with 4 players in the top 16, I do think that Aeldari are going to be looking fairly strong as we round out this season and as we look forward to December or early January data slate updates. And we may see this faction get curtailed a little bit since it has been overrepresented, I think, for the last couple of months. Now, we also, interestingly, see some good representation from World Eaters, which have been doing fairly well, although albeit with almost entirely their Berserker Warband detachment. Turns out when you build an entire army around a single detachment, that's the one way you play it. This included an undefeated result at the Broadsword Wargaming Major number 7, the Hogtowner 2025, as well as Madness in the Middle. Tau Empire also saw 2 undefeated results at the Innsmouth Slaughter GT, as well as Beast Coast Gaming Fall Brawl GT, and we saw some newcomers to the metagame. This included Drukhari, which took down the 40k Brawl. That's Steven Box from Vanguard Tactics, doing pretty well at that event. We're going to be talking about that one quite a bit in this video. Grey Knights took down the Manawatu Maelstrom. Death Guard took down the Bunker Down RBBR GT. Adeptus Custodes took the Silverdale Vortex VFT GT. Salamanders winning the Turkeys and Terminators Geek Shack GT. Chaos Space Marines taking down the Collector Mania Premier GT. And last but certainly not least, Adepta Sororitas taking down the Dark Sphere November Major. And with that, we'll go ahead and dive into these lists just after a word from our sponsors. This video has been sponsored by the most impressive competitive terrain solution I've ever worked with, and that is Foldforge. Foldforge is a system of modular, disassemblable terrain features for Warhammer 40k and other tabletop miniature games. The system uses building walls that are printed in a high-resolution FDM printer, such that their components can fold and unfold, allowing for easy storage and quick assembly, with magnets that allow you to quickly assemble and disassemble. Using these folding wing tabs, they then lock together and create a robust terrain solution. The modular characteristic of these ruins allow them to flip from one side to another. So when you're playing something like a chapter-approved 2025 format, where depending on the deployment zone, the ruins may be flipped from one side to another, you can simply reassemble the structure on the fly in order to construct the second layout. This also means that most of these buildings can be linked together, which allows you to expand them out if you want more narrative play. On top of that, your Foldforge terrain set also comes in its own bespoke carry case. Each of the pieces has its own slot, so it's easy to remove from the case and repack back in. And with the ease of assembling the magnetized pieces, you can also set up an entire table in under 2 minutes. So say goodbye to overpacked closets and overflowing shelves, and say hello to Foldforge. Check them out in the link down in the video description to get your Foldforge today. So we're going to start with the Broadsword Wargaming GT that was taken down by Colin Power. Now, this is one of the larger events of the weekend, boasting almost 90 players, and Colin was able to take it down going 5-0. Not the only undefeated player at the event, but the highest placing, playing Aeldari in an aspect host. Now, most of the Aeldari lists this weekend were relatively cookie cutter, and this one isn't that much different. It is running both a Wave Serpent and a Falcon, so we have 2 transports to move and to shoot and scoot back into. One of them is going to be able to use Skyborn Sanctuary to re-embark into. The other one has a unit of Dire Avengers with Asterman, so they're going to be able to use Asterman shoot and move ability in order to re-embark into the Falcon. So we have a unit of 10 Fire Dragons with Fuegan to go into the Wave Serpent. We have a unit of 5 Dire Avengers with Asterman to go into the Falcon. From there, we also have Janezar and Lycus as the other 2 Phoenix Lords, and everything else is mostly just Aeldari MSU. This includes 2 units of 5 Dark Reapers, a unit of 5 House Howling Banshees to go with Jane Czar, 3 units of 5 Rangers for early game infiltration, 3 units of 5 Swooping Hawks, 3 units of 5 Warp Spiders. Pretty standard stuff from Aeldari this week. Now from there, we're going to move over to the Hogtowner 2025, an event that was taken down by Clayton Montour, who is running World Eaters today. This was in a Berserker Warband, the sort of standard detachment for World Eaters, and this includes Karn the Betrayer, a Master of Executions with Berserker Glaive, as well as, and here's where things get interesting, 3 Slaughterbound. We're all in on Slaughterbound today. Everything is about 8-bound and Exalted 8-bound. One of these guys was taking Favored of Khorne, the other one with Battle Lust for reroll charges. We then had 2 units of Khorne Berserkers, so 1 to attach with Karn, 1 to attach with the Master of Executions. We did have 1 Chaos Rhino to carry those guys to the battle, but the other unit would be ground pounding. And then from the rest of the list, it was mostly going to be 8-bound focused. That includes 3 units of standard 8-bound as well as 3 units of Exalted 8-bound that could then attach the Slaughterbound to give them their offensive bonuses. So we could give the Slaughterbound additional damage when targeting monsters and vehicles, making them potentially up to 3 damage apiece with their Finest Hour ability, turning that damage into devastating wounds, which is potentially a lot of output. We then also have a Goremonger squad for the backline and 2 units of 2 Chaos Spawn to continue to act as utility units. Mostly fairly standard stuff, although the inclusion of 3 Slaughterbound in addition to mass Exalted 8-bound, does mean that this army is incredibly good at cracking through heavy armor. And while it does have some standard inclusions, like the normal Khorne Berserkers and the number of 8-bound units that we're taking, the emphasis on Slaughterbound and those characters with hefty damage output definitely adds a unique spin to this army. Now from there, we'll move over and talk about Tau Empire, who took down the Beast Coast Gaming Fall Brawl GT. Now, Tau Empire has been in an interesting position. They have an incredible amount of internal viability for their different detachments. Things like Monka Kalyan are both great. We have seen Crude Hunting Packs do well, as well as more esoteric detachments. And one of them is this one. This is Retaliation Cadre. Now, Michel Dorcas took this one down to an undefeated record, and this included Commander Farsight, as well as a trio of Crisis Commanders. That's 2 Cold Star Commander battlesuits, one with prototype weapon system to give him lethal or sustained hits, the other one just naked with no additional enhancements, as well as an Enforcer Commander battlesuit with Starfire Ignition System, so he can up down. So we have 2 Cold Star Commanders to improve the speed of their unit, and then the Enforcer Commander is going to be able to redeploy himself wherever he's needed. Now, in this case, one of the Cold Star Commanders, the one with the prototype weapon system, was running a combination of burst cannons, high output burst cannons, and cyclic ion blasters. It's likely that that guy's going to be hanging out with one of our Star Scythe battlesuit teams. The other Crisis Commander is running 4 fusion blasters. That is the one without prototype weapon system, and he's going to be hanging out with a Sunforge battlesuit team. Lastly, the Enforcer Commander battlesuit is running 3 missile pods, as well as a cyclic ion blaster, which means it's likely that he's going to be hanging out with a Fire Knife battlesuit team. So we do have that 1 Fire Knife battlesuit team, 3 models, all of them equipped with missile pods. With the up-down, that allows those guys to continuously redeploy to get lines of fire into enemy utility units to clear screens or kill lightly armored units. And that is buffed by the Fire Knife Battlesuit's datasheet ability. We have 2 Star Scythe Battlesuit teams to clear hordes. One of them is equipped with Tau Flamers. Oftentimes, these guys will just be by themselves, and they'll run up, and they're only 110 points for a massive number of Flamers, plus a relatively resilient unit. They're able to go trade for opposing utility units and light infantry. The other unit is running burst cannons, so 2 burst cannons per model, plus we have that Enforcer Commander battlesuit who's going to join in and get 1 billion more burst cannons, high output burst cannons, cyclic ion blasters, and all of those are going to benefit from that additional bonus AP that the Star Scythe battlesuit teams are going to give them, which gives you an immense attack volume for these guys, especially when you use the Arakan protocol to grant these guys additional sustained hits too against large units. That makes this army incredibly good at clearing hordes, and when you consider that Tau Empire just generally tend to be good against heavy armor, you're going to be able to cover all your bases. We do have a Ghost Kill battlesuit and a unit of Kroot Carnivores to hold down the midboard, a Krutox Rider squad for some early game utility, a pair of Pathfinder teams, one of them with a Recon drone for infiltration, the other one with a Grab Inhibitor drone for the -2 to be charged, 2 Riptide battlesuits. Those ones are both equipped with the ion accelerators, so they're going to be long-range damage output, as well as 2 stealth battlesuit teams for utility and for spotting. So we do have heavy anti-tank from the Sunforged battlesuits, as well as the Riptide battlesuits. We have spotting from the Pathfinder teams, as well as some forward operation from them, and from the stealth battlesuits. And then following that up, we have lots of anti-infantry from the Starlight battlesuit teams. And we have ways to do things like shoot and move after shooting with Torch Star Gambit inside this detachment. So the army is incredibly flexible while it's bringing to bear its wide variety of weapon profiles. Now, from there, we're moving on to Death Guard with the Bunker Down GT, RBBR. I think that's Red Bluff Battle Reports, if I remember correctly. This is Thomas Shipensky, who is running Death Guard, one of the first factions that we don't have multiple undefeateds for. And here's the interesting thing about this list is that it is not a normal Death Guard list, and I actually absolutely love to see armies like this. This is a Taliban Summoners detachment. Now, this is from the Demon Focus detachment from the Death Guard Codex. This allows it to play things like Nurgle demons that are included inside the Death Guard Codex. This includes things like Rotigus, as well as Beasts of Nurgle and Nurglings. The benefits of Taliban Summoners are pretty wide. First of all, they grant Nurgle demons the benefit of Contagions of Nurgle if you're within 7 inches of a Death Guard unit. And similarly, if a Nurgle demon is near a Death Guard unit, they will gain an enhanced version of their Contagions of Nurgle. They actually gain additional range on their auras. In addition to that, you're also able to use a wide variety of enhancements to buff those Nurgle demons. So not only are the Nurgle demons gaining buffs from the Death Guard units, they are granting buffs to the Death Guard units and are able to be buffed by additional effects. This detachment, I think, is one of the more competitive ones for Death Guard, and honestly is probably one of the strongest demon detachments in the game, especially out of the allied demon detachments. Now, this includes a Lord of Contagion with Fell Harvester. This grants additional attacks to that model's melee attack, so he's going to hit a little bit harder, and the Lord of Contagion being one of the strongest combat characters in the game, it makes sense to put him there. In addition, we have a Lord of Virulence with Beckoning Blight. That gives him essentially the Demonic Incursion detachment ability as an aura, so it's able to 6-inch deep strike Nurgle demons or Plague Legion units if they set up wholly within 12 inches of the bearer, which is fairly easy to do. The nice thing about this being on a Lord of Virulence is that you can deep strike the Lord of Virulence before you set up that aura to then deep strike your Nurgle demons. So if we need to, for example, we can keep this Lord of Virulence in reserve alongside a bunch of Nurglings or Rotigus, for example. Then, if as soon as we need Rotigus on the table, we drop the Lord of Virulence down, he can apply his buff to the Death Guard ranged units, and then drop Rotigus down next to him, get a 6-inch charge out of Deep Strike with Rotigus. Bob's your uncle. You've beat your opponent to death with a stick. Speaking of Rotigus, he's here too. He's great. He gives +1 damage to your Nurgle demons. He's a big tanky boy. It's awesome. The other cool thing about these big tanky units inside this particular detachment is we can actually fire into melee with them. So you can do things like 6-inch deep strike Rotigus near enemies, charge into them, engage them, slow them down, prevent them from escaping from Rotigus, and then shoot into melee with him. You can spend a CP to allow your weapons to fire as if your Nurgle demons weren't engaging, with the chance that you do deal damage to the Nurgle demons, but that allows you to do things like fire into melee even with your blast weapons, which is exciting, into something, for example, that's engaged with Rotigus. So you're able to tar pit your opponents down and then fire into their own melee. We have 3 Beasts of Nurgle in order to act as utility units, a Blightlord Terminator squad, 5 Blightlord Terminators, probably to attach in with the Lord of Virulence himself. We have a Death Shroud Terminator unit to attach in with the Lord of Contagion, a single Flesh Mower Fetid Bloat Drone, as well as 3 Heavy Blight Launcher Fetid Bloat Drones, 3 Myphitic Blight Haulers, and 3 units of Nurglings, 2 units of 3, as well as 1 unit of 6. That 1 unit of 6 is going to be the target of Persistent Pests, which allows you to respawn one of your Nurgling units when it's destroyed. So you can forward deploy that unit, prevent your opponent from deploying into that area, and then once your opponent extends out to kill it, you can just respawn it and bring it back, use it to score secondaries and maneuver around the battlefield in the future. Now let's talk about the pièce de résistance from this weekend. This is Drukhari, which took down the 40k Brawl GT. Now this was run by none other than Stephen Box from Vanguard Tactics, who was able to go 5-0 at the event with a brand new codex. And he was, in this case, running Reaper's Wager. Now there's an interesting sort of dichotomy within the Drukhari faction. We saw Reaper's Wager get relatively widely played at the World Championships, although it did did not actually have the highest placement. We saw Spectacle of Spite actually place higher than this particular detachment. That said, this detachment's still good. Gives you universal reroll 1s to hit, as well as access to reroll 1s to wound if you are losing the wager between Drukhari and Harlequin units, and we do have some particular technology inside this army in order to try to jump that wager back and forth. Now, in this case, we're playing an Archon with Webway Walker to give him Deep Strike. We have Drazar, the Great Man himself, just the Incubi character who's going to hit really hard. A Homunculus with Conductor of Torment. That allows him to switch your wager in order to grant your Drukhari units reroll 1s to wound. So, if your Drukhari units are losing the wager, you can gain a pain token and cause them to win the wager, which is a great. Obviously, the pain token economy is very important inside Drukhari, the new codex, so having a way to generate pain tokens is good. Now, there are Harlequin units in the codex. There's not a lot of them, but you could have situations where Drukhari are losing at the beginning of your turn. In addition, if you have a pain token in your pool, you can discard that in your command phase to cause Harlequin units from your army to win the wager. The reason that that's relevant is that it gives every Drukhari model in your army reroll 1s to wound until such time as they destroy an enemy unit. So, on demand, you can basically use an empowerment ability to turn reroll 1s to wound onto your entire army until you accidentally kill something. In addition to that, we have Lady Malice. She's an incredible force multiplier. She gives you a redeployment effect. She gives you Agent of Discord effect, so command point tax, as well as giving her unit lethal hits. And when she's embarked into a big unit of models with high attack volume, she's going to be able to allow them to do a lot of damage even into high toughness enemies. We have Lilith Hasperax to clear infantry, as well as a standard succubus with Arc Raider. Now, this is pretty nice because it gives you a 9-inch scout effect. So you're able to push a unit of witches inside a venom 9 inches forward to clear enemy utility units, to stage them in a central position, or to try to jail your opponent early. There is a raider and a venom in the list, so one of the witch units is going to be combat squatted into 2 smaller units. Which one the Arc Succubus goes in? I imagine it ends up being the larger unit, and then Lilith Hesperax probably goes into a smaller unit to hit hard herself. That allows you to scout up the raider and then push that unit out aggressively, but I'm not 100% sure. It might depend on the particular matchup. Now, from there, we have a unit of 10 Hellions. They're incredible in the new codex. They can empower themselves to get bonus attacks and strength. They're high damage. They're sustained hits. It's basically all positive for the Hellion unit. We then have 3 units of Incubi, 2 units of 5, as well as a unit of 10. Now, one of these is going to join Drazar. Drazar can empower the unit to gain +1 to wound. One of them is going to join Lady Malice, and I see most of the time you see the larger unit in attached with Lady Malice because she can give them all lethal hits, so a higher attack volume benefiting from those critical effects is great, but it might be a situation where it depends on the particular matchup. And one of them is likely to jump into the Archon that allows him to Webway Walker, rapid ingress out of Deep Strike, and then run in and get to grips with your opponent. You do have things like Advance and Charge in this detachment, which is going to make the fast movement of units like the Hellions or units like the Incubi that are rapid ingressing onto the battlefield very useful indeed. We then have a Reaver unit with a Heat Lance alongside a single Heavy Weapon Scourge unit with Haywire Blasters, 1 unit of 2 Talos, as well as a pair of Void Weavers. So these Void Weavers are going to be the Harlequin contingent of the army. So at the very beginning of the game, they're going to be getting reroll 1s to wound, since Drukhari is considered to be winning the wager at the beginning, meaning that the Void Weavers are generally just relatively high efficiency ranged attacks. They have lone operative. They're able to take areas of the board where your other Drukhari units may be in danger, and they're able to screen out enemies and just continuously pump damage into their opponent's army. If they ever kill a unit, they're then going to grant reroll 1s to wound to every single other unit in the army, because everything else is Drukhari, but that isn't a Void Weaver, until such time as one of those Drukhari units kills an enemy. So you can set up a situation where, for example, the Scourges come in, they deal a bunch of damage with their Haywire Blasters, they leave something low. The Void Weavers then finish off that unit by the end of the shooting phase. You go to the fight phase, and your first 1 to 2 activations during the fight phase are getting reroll 1s to wound until you kill a unit and donate the wager back to Harlequins, which can give you a lot of additional efficiency over the course of the turn. So pretty interesting build from Drukhari here. I definitely think that there's a lot of experimentation going on with this faction, but I'm interested to see where the faction ends up settling. Now, moving over to the Manawatu Maelstrom For Grey Knights, Matt Van Wyck went undefeated with this faction and a very non-standard variety of the army, which is really cool to see. I've been seeing an endless cavalcade of Warpaint task forces recently, but it seems like Grey Knights are branching out a little bit here. And in this case, Matt is playing Sanctic Spearhead, which is, I think, one of the most interesting detachments in the relatively new Grey Knights Codex. This gives all your vehicle units auto 6 advances permanently all the time, and you also gain assault when you advance on all your weapons. So you're essentially a almost strictly superior version of something like a Firestorm Assault Force from Space Marines, which instead of giving all of your little units, like your, regular Marines assault, it gives all your vehicles assault, but it also makes them significantly faster. And when we're talking about Nemesis Dread Knights, which can advance, shoot, and charge, giving them the ability to auto 6 advance wildly improves their threat range. So in this case, Matt was playing a Brotherhood Tech Marine, as well as Castellan Crow, and a single Grandmaster on Nemesis Dread Knight with a Sigil of Exigence that allows him to, when you attack him, return into reserve instead of being attacked. So he can redeploy immediately around the battlefield. It is expensive. It only works once per game, but it does mean that he can push out really aggressively. And if you are trying to engage him in a gunfight, you're simply not going to be able to do so because he's just going to run away as soon as that occurs. Now, from there, we also have a pair of strike squads for utility. So those guys are going to obstacle objectives. You have 2 of them. So one of them is going to be able to range out early in order to actually grab midboard objectives, whereas one of them can hold down the backline objective in the early game. We then have a bunch of vehicles. We do have a couple units of purifiers, a unit of 5 as well as a unit of 10. All of those, importantly to note, are equipped entirely with storm bolters. There are no heavy weapons in these purifier squads because we're going to be using them to punch people in melee. Now, there is a +1 to wound against monsters and vehicles stratagem in this detachment, given the fact that purifier squads also gain wound rerolls baseline, giving them +1 to wound, makes that go a really long way. So you can actually get a ton of damage out of these purifier squads, and obviously the one with Castellan Crow can clear a lot of infantry. They're going to be shooting a ton of anti-infantry 2+ ranged attacks in addition to their mass storm bolters. So that's all great. In addition to that, we have a Storm Raven gunship, a Land Raider Redeemer, and a pair of Nemesis Dread Knights. Now, as I've already discussed, the Nemesis Dread Knights are incredibly flexible in this attachment. They're basically baseline move 14, effectively, as long as they're not trying to fall back, because they can always advance and do things, shoot and charge after advancing. So they're super duper fast, and you can use Gate of Infinity to put them in reserve, rapid ingress them, move them super far, and blow stuff up. It's all great. In addition to that, you also have an incredible threat range from the Storm Raven gunship. Plus, that's going to be something that can deliver these purifiers to the middle of the table early in the game without having to deal with screening, which is something that the purifiers obviously don't want to typically have to do. You would love to. The ideal situation is get the purifiers in, shoot an infantry unit to death, charge something big, give themselves +1 to wound, beat it up, and then move out from there. And the downside is a lot of times that is instigated by a 9-inch charge coming out of Deep Strike. However, if you're in something like a Storm Raven gunship that can run to the middle of the table and then disembark them on a future turn, or you're in the Land Raider Redeemer, which can move up into the center of the table and then disembark and allow them to charge thanks to its assault ramp, you don't have to worry about making a 9-inch charge out of Deep Strike in order to get them into melee. On top of that, this is all facilitated by Force Wave, which allows these vehicles to move horizontally through terrain features. So unlike many other detachments, you can put the Land Raider on the battlefield behind a big ruin or something and then just pay a CP to phase it through the ruin, where most of the time you aren't going to be able to do that with most Land Raider equivalents in other detachments. The same thing goes for the Nemesis Dread Knights. You can do something like rapid ingress them behind a terrain feature, Force Wave through that terrain feature, and then charge afterwards, which allows them to access anything they want effectively. So this detachment's hyper flexible. It doesn't have a lot in the realm of reliability. The only real, no rerolls to speak of, and the only real sort of offensive improvement it has is that +1 to wound against monsters and vehicles. However, if you can set up a situation where you don't need many additional reliability improvements, this detachment can be incredibly strong. It has super fast vehicles and super maneuverable vehicles that can either redeploy themselves, teleport around the table with Gate of Infinity, or move through terrain features and just phase through things and in order to deliver things like Purifier Squads in the early game. Now with that, we're going to move over to the Silverdale Vortex VFTGT. This was won by AJ Wong playing Adeptus Custodes in a Lions of the Emperor detachment. This included a Blade Champion with superior creation, so once he dies, he's able to respawn once per game. We have a Shield Captain in Alaris Terminator armor, that guy with Admana Mortis. He's rocking the Castellan Axe, and Admana Mortis is able to pump up the strength, AP, and damage characteristics of that weapon, so it's actually able to hit relatively hard for an incredibly efficient points value. And then we also have a standard Blade Champion as well. Now, the benefit of those Blade Champions, obviously, is that we're able to use Gilded Champion in order to advance and charge, and then refresh that advance and charge, so we can do so multiple times per game, which otherwise are relatively slow. From there, we have a unit of 5 Custodian Guard, all of them 100% with Guardian Spears. Now, I think these guys are going to join with Inquisitor Kyria Draxus. She gives them some additional shooting power. She gives them situationally +1 to hit against Xenos units, but also she just fires another 10 2-damage shots in addition to their own 10 2-damage shots. And then when they use their Sentinel Storm to fire twice, she's going to be able to fire twice as well, so that unit does a ton of damage. We then have a pair of Custodian Warden squads, 2 units of 5, both of those with Vexillas. Those are going to attach to the Blade Champions, pretty standard loadout. We have a Calidus Assassin to mess with opponents' command point generation, a pair of Caladius Grav Tanks, as well as a Witch Seeker unit for early game objective scoring, and a pair of Prosecutors. There is as well a unit of 2 Alaris Custodians to attach with the Shield Captain in Terminator armor. He can lose that unit. They can teleport around, obviously, redeploy him into a relevant position, threaten an opponent's flank. Once they're dead, he can turn all damage incoming to 1. You can use Gilded Champion to refresh that ability, so he can potentially do it over 2 separate turns. Pretty standard stuff from Lions of the Emperor, but it is something that we haven't necessarily seen in a little while. So it's cool to see Adeptus Custodes continuing to do well. Now, moving on from there, let's talk about Salamanders. We're going to move over to the Turkeys and Terminators GT at Geek Shack. This was won by Adrian Lopez, who was running the Green Armored Boys in a Firestorm Assault Force. Not Forge Father Seekers. We are playing Firestorm largely to take some of the enhancements that we have in the faction. And I think in this case, we may be playing a little bit with things like Rapid Embarkation. Now, in this case, we're running Adrex Egatone, Vulcan Heston, the 2 Salamander characters, as well as a Gravis Armored Captain with War-Tempered Artifice. This adds 3 to the strength characteristic of the bearer's melee weapons. And given that the Gravis Armored Captain is able to take 2 separate melee attacks, while attack bonuses to extra attack weapons don't actually apply, statistical improvements like additional strength characteristic will apply to both. So, for example, in this case, the Gravis Armored Captain's running a Power Fist and a second Power Fist, a Relic Fist and a Power Fist, so a total of 6 2-damage attacks. Both of those are going to gain a bonus of 3 strength thanks to War-Tempered Artifice, giving him 6 Strength 11 melee attacks that he can then improve with Crucible of Battle for additional strength. We then have an Impulsor, as well as an Aggressor squad for that Gravis Armored Captain to jump into. Now, while he is equipped with a Boltstorm Gauntlet, so he's going to get just his 3 pistol shots, the Aggressor squad is equipped with Flamestorm Gauntlet, so we're going to be able to discount Immolation Protocols in this detachment to give that entire unit devastating wounds on all their torrent weapons. They are twin linked, so we can fish for devastating wounds and fish an enormous number of mortal wounds out of that attack. We have a Blade Guard veteran squad to go in the Impulsor alongside Adrex Agatone. Incredibly high damage output unit. They get reroll 1s to hit innately. He gives them full rerolls to wound. You can use Crucible of Battle to make them wound the entire game on 5s, which means on average they kill almost anything in the game, basically, is the long and short of it. We have 2 Eradicator squads as well to act in anti-vehicle roles. These guys are also good because if they are embarking in any of the transports, you can use Burning Vengeance to hop them out and attack into enemies that are attacking those transports. We have a pair of Gladiator Lancers for some backline shooting, alongside a 10 model Infernus Marine squad. I think we may see Vulcan Heston actually join the Infernus Marine squad. That often is a combo because they're able to protect him for a little bit, and then he can also always point at something to get wound rerolls against with that unit. Although, in some cases, you want to disembark the Infernus Marines from a transport, run them forward, keep Vulcan back as his own unit, and then use rapid embarkation to jump Vulcan into a transport after he points his buff for the Infernus Marines. He doesn't actually have to be leading the unit. He doesn't actually have a leadership ability at all. However, as long as he's pointing at something that he can see, the Infernus Marines will get wound rerolls, and you can use Immolation Protocols for the full 2 CP on them to give them devastating wounds as well, which can be incredibly scary. But at the very least, these guys are going to be able to bully the mid-board. They're incredible Overwatch threats. They're incredible threats for Burning Vengeance, and they put an enormous number of objective control characteristic on central objectives with the ability to advance and shoot, clear out your opponents on that objective, and use the Inspiring Leader ability from Vulcan for that bonus objective control. We then have an Invader ATV and a pair of repulsors. One of them is going to be able to carry the Infernus squad to the fight. The other one is going to be able to carry the Aggressor squad with the attached captain in, and we have a couple utility units in the form of a pair of Scout squads. Pretty wild list. While we have been seeing Salamanders doing pretty well, it typically tends to be more MSU focused. It takes Adrax, it takes Vulcan, the powerful characters from the detachment, but oftentimes it then takes a bunch of 5-man or smaller Infernus Marine squads, as well as things like lieutenants for Adrax's unit. In this case, we are just putting it all in 3 baskets, essentially. The 7 Blade Guard veterans, plus Adrax, the 7 aggressors, including the Gravis captain, and the 11 Infernus Marines plus Vulcan. If those are all able to commit into your opponent's army and do appreciable damage, you can roll it out to a win from there, using the Eradicator squads as well. Very different than we've seen from Salamanders in the past. We very rarely see Salamanders with these huge bricks of models, and that's really cool to see. Now from there, we're going to move over to the Collector Mania Premier GT. This was won by Trey Burnett running Chaos Space Marines, and this was Veterans of the Long War as the detachment. We saw this one do very well at the London Grand Tournament a couple weeks ago, where Liam VSL took that event down and then went on to get to the finals of the World Championships. So very clearly some bones to this detachment. This gives you an Oath of Moment style of effect. You choose a target of hatred or a focus of hatred for your army and then get bonuses against it, including hit rerolls and enhanced stratagems when they do stuff. And in this case, we're running a Chaos Lord, Cypher, Fabius Bile, and Vashtor the Archiphane, almost entirely epic heroes besides that Chaos Lord. We have a Cultist Mob, as well as a pair of 5-man Legionary squads. Oftentimes we take these just as their 5-model squads themselves. They're able to trade for objectives fairly reliably. We have a pair of Chaos Rhinos, as well as a Chaos Biker squad, 2 Predator Destructors for some long-range shooting, as well as a big Chosen squad. Now, the Chosen typically will attach with Fabius Bile and embark in one of those Rhinos. Bile's buffs for leadership tend to go a longer way the more models are in his unit, because he's affecting more models with his improved statistics, and the longer that you can keep that unit alive, the more his damage blank is going to come into play. The Chaos Lord can attach into one of the Legionnaire squads, and then when he swings for his once per game additional damage melee attack with devastating wounds, and the Legionnaires grant wound rerolls, he goes absolutely insane, especially if he's attacking the focus of hatred, so he gets full hit and wound rerolls. We then have a pair of Obliterator units. These guys go absolutely nuts once they have their focus of hatred in sight. That's because they can have sustained hits 1 high volume shots, d6 plus 3 sustained hits 1 warp hail attacks. You can also be lethal hits thanks to dark packs, or you can fire potentially sustained hits, strength 12, AP 3, 4 damage melted to focused malice attacks. So given the fact that those are each individually super high value, gaining sustained hits plus hit rerolls on those is an incredible improvement in our efficiency. So the Obliterators, in addition to that, are able to fire indirectly, so we can do something like choose focus of hatred that's out of line of sight, teleport the Obliterators onto the field, then use their once per games to just blast that unit off from out of line of sight, even if your opponent is trying not to engage with you. So while the Obliterators can hold down the midfield with their standard shooting, they can also use that once per game ability to govern where your opponent is able to safely stage. Now, we have a Venom Crawler in there as well. The Venom Crawler is important for Vashtor because he's going to grant Vashtor Lone Operative. So Vashtor is going to be able in the early game to hold down objectives in the middle of the table and force your opponent to get really, really close in order to actually take the objectives back from him. In addition, Vashtor is going to buff that Venom Crawler with additional strength, which obviously is very nice for that as well. So it's a little trading piece that can also give a huge benefit to one of the strongest combat characters in the faction already. Super cool to see more success from Veterans of the Long War, and especially at smaller table events. Now from there, let's move on to the final list of the weekend. This is Aiden Brocklehurst on Adeptus Sororitas from the Dark Sphere November Major. Now, Aiden was playing Champions of Faith, and while we have seen Hallowed Martyrs basically be the name of the game for Adeptus Sororitas for a really long time, Champions of Faith has basically come out as being the breakout, especially since the World Championships, where we saw tons of Champions of Faith do incredibly well. Now, the big benefit of this detachment is that you have these incredible Celestian Sacrosanct units. They are permanently -1 to be wounded as long as they have an attached character. You can put things like Hospitallers in them to give them regeneration and a 5+ feel no pain, or in this case, I think we're just going to be taking some more combat-oriented characters inside those units. This includes a pair of Canonesses, both of them with Rods of Office, which grants reroll hit rolls of 1 for their entire attached unit. Now, that goes a long way when you are talking about Celestian Sacrosancts with Hallowed Maces that can also gain sustained hits from Suffer Not the Unfaithful. So those critical effects are huge, and giving additional rerolls to gain those critical effects is enormous. A lot of times you'll see Hospitallers in these units to make them tougher to kill. In this case, the Canonesses are just going to improve their damage output. Now, you also have things like To the Heart of Heresy for additional strength and AP, so gaining free stratagems like we do from the Canonesses is enormous. Now, from there, we're also bringing the Demonifuge as well as Morven Vol and Saint Celestine for some backline disruption. We have a standard Battle Sister squad alongside a unit of 3 Arcoflagellants for some utility. The 3 units of 10 Celestian Sacrosancts, 2 of those are equipped with Hallowed Maces for the lethal hits. 1 of them is equipped with Anointed Halberds for the additional strength and AP, although lower damage. We then also have a Dominion squad that is equipped with Flamers, a pair of Retributor squads for some late game damage output, a big Sanctifier unit for some early game disruption. They do have Scout and a bunch of Flamer attacks, which is nice. We have a Seraphim squad, a Paragon Warsuit squad, and 2 vehicles. This includes a Paragon Warsuit squad for Morven Vol and 2 transports. This includes an Immolator. This Immolator is equipped with multi-meltas, but it is going to be combat squatting out the Dominion, so we are able to early game deliver 4 Flamers to your opponent's deployment zone and clear out enemy light units with the AP0 Flamer attacks. We then have a Rhino, which also is able to scout thanks to the Sanctifier squad and then deliver more Flamer attacks. That's incredibly important for matchups like Eldar, for example, which are bringing tons and tons of light toughness 3 infantry units, and being able to put on the top of turn 1 2 sets of flamethrowers into their deployment zone to clear out those units early is huge. It's an enormous tempo play, requires you to then focus fire on those flamer units to get rid of them. Then that opens you up to move all of the Sacrosancts to the middle of the table. You're able to either threaten control of objectives or simply charge your opponent on the subsequent turn and start killing their army. And given how annoying to kill Celestian Sacrosancts are over the course of a long period of time, they're -1 to be wounded, they have invulnerable saves, it's really obnoxious. Most infantry sweeping units are not going to be super efficient at doing it, especially alongside characters attached. You're going to be able to roll that out to a big victory. We saw similar varieties of the army being played by the likes of Jack Harpster at the World Championships to great effect, and I'm sure this was equally effective given the fact that it did win the event. So big congratulations to Aiden for winning with this style. And with that, those are all the best armies of Warhammer 40k for this week. Let me know down in the comment section below which one was your favorite. I really appreciate you watching all the way to the end. I appreciate Foldforge for sponsoring this video. And if you want my coverage of the World Championships of Warhammer, I will put a link down in the video description for that as well. And with that, I'm going to sign off. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.